Hi guys, I'm back again in front of the camera, in front of me, nice old-fashioned grandma cupboard, back home, and it's Wednesday, the 28th of November, and it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm still not completely awake. I'm trying to use some essential oils to kind of nudge my brain into some form of semblance of activity here. But I suppose that as I get this show on the road, I'll manage to, I'll sort of pull myself together. I'm trying. I am hoping, anyway. It's just started raining, finally. The weather is changing. We've had another rather dry spell of, this continental type climate sort of weather that we've been having for a larger part of 2018, really. And to me, the fact that it started raining is always it's like a release and also a sense of a relief. Even something is, the humidity is rising and everything is, there's a wind from the ocean, from the North Sea, and it tends sort of to be in my, I don't know, suppose it's in my genes really to have a bit more of a sense of feeling safe. It doesn't, I don't think it should rain all the time, obviously, but it has to rain now and again. And maybe it's an interesting way or a bridge to my theme for today, because I have a kind of a multifaceted subject that I want to talk about in the way that I can sort of present. It's very difficult. I am trying to get into focus about focus, really. Concentrated attention, and to see where that will take us, in the sense that there's a couple of things that I have concluded for myself. The first thing that I've concluded, let me start with that, is that I need enough focus, enough concentrated attention to get me, to get things done, whatever it is. Doesn't matter really what the activity is, but it shouldn't be over a certain level. So there's like this green zone where everything's fine. Below that, I'm just on automatic pilot, and above that, I get obsessive. So I think that's pretty essential. Concerning the oil paint business, I tend to, because I'm really passionate about that, as you have by now figured out, I tend to get obsessive. I tend to, my brain goes into sort of a constant hyper activity where even when I'm not painting or actually, sensibly preparing or thinking about techniques or whatever, I am constantly busy with it. And there's like a hyper focus there. And that tends to happen whenever I'm really passionate about something, but also it kind of becomes, it's almost a separate entity where all my energy gets sort of shunted into that thing, and it leads its own life. It is like a separate living animal almost, and I'm just jogging along behind it trying to keep up. And I don't really like it when it goes like that. I can see how it's part of my personality, how it's part of my horoscope even. I'm a fiery person, I have the moon in Aries and what have you, and I can be pretty, it's good to have that part in me where, actually Otherwise, maybe that's how it works really, is that I tend to be a really lazy person. That's one part of my personality. So, of course, in order to get anything done, there has to be this counterpart, this other half, this opposite part of the mechanism, right? That makes sure that actually I stay focused and stay put and actually get the thing done, get the job done. If I don't obsess, I am worried that I will just sort of devolve back into my lazy self, my passive, powerless self, trigger, 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 and nothing comes out of my life. Nothing gets done, nothing gets made, nothing gets constructed, and there isn't anything, I don't have anything to show for myself for walking on this planet for 50 odd years. So the tiny worry about the other half, the actually at that moment invisible half of my person, the lazy part, right? The worry about that sort of fuels the obsessiveness, obviously. For me, this is how it works for me. Anybody can have, but I am kind of, postulating here that we have these oppositions within us. So that is I'm here in the middle, looking at you, you're looking at me, and you're getting like a projection of whatever it is that I'm saying and all my stuff and the way I look and the way my hair looks and all that. And I am sort of trying to extract from that the real life thing that sort of explains how I tend to feel about things, how I tend to go about things, and that there is always a visible part and an invisible part. I'm not saying anything completely revolutionary here. It's been done before. But the interesting bit here is that apparently we are very elastic. Our consciousness is elastic, and it tries, or we try, to generate states of activity where we more or less can rely on getting a certain product finished by the end of the day, or getting a certain result or a certain interaction completed, or whatever it is that we're about. But in order to get to that, I would call that a professional state, from the private to the professional. There's like a gap in between. It's like an opposition of two elements. And in order for us to, from the animals that we are, to go to a state of aware and available and presentable and what have you, and creative and all that, to be that person, I suppose I really need my hyper focus. Otherwise, I just don't take it seriously enough. And or this is the result of my experiences, and it just has shaped me in such a way that I kind of pull myself forward or propel myself forward into a hyper focused state, which isn't such a big deal. It's not bad for me to be that way, unless I go into what I call pinball mode, which is like it's really completely taken me over. And that doesn't really tend to happen to myself that much, but it does happen to a few people I know. And I suppose there's it's quite difficult once we've gotten into the pinball mode, the almost hysterical state of it's become a survival thing, but you don't realize that. It happens to me, this thing happens to me when I'm hyper emotional about something. So not obsessed or interested or involved in, engaged in painting or anything nice like that. but when I'm afraid, that's what happens. And then how I look at it for myself, I have been working on that for the past 10 years or so. Really a much longer period than just the period since the soul retrieval activities and all that. Way before, I already felt a very strong need to disengage from that state, because it was so excruciatingly uncomfortable to be, especially not only to be in that state of absolute out of control panic, incapacitated paralyzed by fear and people's actions and things like that, but also when it came on me, it came as a complete surprise each and every time. And this is really, I suppose it becomes a mental health issue that I had to face. Back in those days, I could just go dead inside at some point when I felt overloaded. In hindsight, that's what I can see now, that I had felt overloaded, I had felt undervalued, I didn't feel seen. There were all sorts of factors. I had to give too much that I didn't have the energy for. There wasn't any, I don't know, just all sorts of things. It's easy in that state to put the blame somewhere outside yourself, to even just think in terms of blame. Whereas I know now that there was just a very large hole in my soul. There was really a hole in my personality, the size of Texas, I think. So there could be no sense of balance and completeness and happiness for me in life as long as I functioned with that hole, right? It was just like there was this edge. Imagine, I used to think of it this way. Imagine a tree that is surrounded by ivy, or maybe it's two trees growing together, because it doesn't necessarily have to mean that one part is a parasite and the other is a victim. Not necessarily. Only the middle tree, the tree that's really the core of the whole thing right there, dies and disappears, disintegrates and falls away. The second tree that has been growing around the other one remains in that shape, right? There's like this cavity in the middle, and depending on what type of green stuff we're talking about, really, it'll develop again, or it'll die, or whatever happens to it. To me, I've always assumed that the fact that I was so dependent on my mother until I was 28 years old, and then she passed away, right? That created this type of emotional vacuum in the middle of my person. I hadn't really even thought about talking about this when I started this video, but it's just a way of illustrating really what it is that I encountered in my life, in how my consciousness was organized. And for some reason, or just the way it really happened, like I expressed when I was talking about my soul retrieval experiences and all that, I kind of managed to fill in that middle part with a substance of consciousness, a sensation that really makes me into a complete human being again. And going from there, I have been able to develop whatever capabilities I have, also coming onto YouTube. Also with oil paint and also doing a million other things and just taking better care of myself and all the rest of it. It was essential to plug the hole first. Let me say that, because in that state of being just this ring-like, solidified ring-like shape around an emptiness, I would not have managed a single thing. I would not have had the heart, so there's a heart right there, okay? The focus also has to do with the heart. And that's a completely different approach to, because normally you would say concentration, mental concentration is a thing of the mind, right? So there you can see that all the layers in our consciousness are really very important and very, you can't really think about one thing without also thinking about all the other things, which is why my talks always get this fuzzy and garbled, kind of complicated and maybe also slightly interesting. So, having said all that, having said that, okay, we're much better now, great, fantastic, we can get things done and we can actually make a difference. What with having heart invested in all things, really, in everything that I do. There's still there's still a lot of programming, so to speak, from the old days, from the days when I really didn't have a clue how to fulfill my promise, how to contribute, how to be that what people needed really from me. And the programming at some point tends to propel me again into hyper focus, obsessiveness, and or pinball mode even when things get bad. But they are then again, going back to this describing what that feels like, I would say that the pinball mode is really a state of fight or flight where quite a lot of your normal capability for reorganizing yourself, for reorganizing the layers of your consciousness and the way you feel is cut short. And it's like there's all this adrenaline going around and you can't even think of eating or drinking or sleep. You can't sleep. You're stressed out and you're exhausting yourself even further. And it's, again, there's this mechanism where it starts to lead its own life. And I think many of us live a life close to or maybe on top of pinball mode. And I am completely and utterly against that. I think it is a waste of our lives because you can never get done whatever it is that you're out to do. You can never do it as well in the pinball mode as you can do it when you're in full possession of your faculties and when you're balanced out, when you have a choice. And I suppose my whole big deal about being a sovereign human being has to do with this as well. It's the same thing. It's different words and slightly different approach, but it's the same thing. Being a sovereign human being means nobody is behind you with a whip. You are not an orc. You are not a slave. You're not a pawn in somebody else's game. So, yeah, I can get quite uptight about that type of thing, really. So, in order, when we have a baggage, a personal, history and a heritage that tends to push us towards pinball mode or scatterbrain mode, which is like a precursor, where you're doing everything at once and you're actually not unhappy about things. That maybe this the line between scatterbrain and pinball is unhappy and scatterbrain is not. Okay, there's I don't know, maybe it's okay for many people to be in scatterbrain mode most of the time and to be just bouncing around and doing the thing and getting a lot of stuff done, and everybody's really pleased with them because they're all over the place and they're very energized and very they're pumped and they're spreading a lot of love around, and so that's fine. For me, not so much. It's one reason is why I don't even edit my videos, and even there's a lot of arms and ers and pauses and type of things in here, is because I think if you're here, you're watching me talk and think, you can live with my reorganizing my stuff to, for the next thing that I'm going to say here. You'll hang in there. You'll manage if I don't, edit the stuff so that everything is just stuck together as closely as possible, because oh my God, I'm so worried that I will waste your time. And so from focus, meandering all over through psychology and whatever, I've actually come to time itself. And sometimes I even think that it would be a blessing, at least I would feel it that way, to just sit here and record a video of me sort of blandly, kindly smiling into the camera, so as for you to have time, however many minutes that would be, that you don't have to spend on anything else. Your time. I think of that's kind of like something I carry around in my heart with me. I've always done this, even in the times when I was just this little fragment of a person. I always had the notion that time is sacred. Time itself is a jewel of infinite beauty and bliss. And all you have to do is make your consciousness register that. So if I cut my video up, and I find it so incredibly upsetting that people can be so stressed out and so worried that people won't take the time to watch. And then, they're in the middle of a forest and everything just has to be edited and edited and edited and cut up. Whereas if you just go into the forest doesn't edit itself for you. Boring. Yeah, it is. But that's a part of life, that there's a ton of energy, a ton of value and of commitment and of personal space that is just on the other side of that boredom, that bored state. If you just manage to shift focus again, here we go. It's the same world. And maybe that's one of the best things that I have to say, really, is that it isn't about ideas, it isn't about images, even though I'm a great fan of images and I love to, twiddle around. It's all about focus. And then not about the intensity of the focus, but about having the freedom to choose where you are. Where is the core? Is it inside you? Is it with other people? Is that okay? Or do you need to address a situation where you're just too tired? And that's all there's to it. And all you need to do is lie on the floor in silence and let the boredom come to you. And then after a tiny while, your inner nature will assert itself again. By itself. Just by itself. Without any effort, really. Maybe it's also about letting go of the effort. So here's another one of my gold nuggets. I hope you enjoy this type of thing. I'm just trying to be a different voice sometimes. And generally advocate freedom of mind. Free your mind, guys. And yeah, so once again, thank you very much for listening to me ramble on about this type of stuff. And I'll see you again soon. I've got tons of stuff, so stay tuned. Bye bye for now.